Good evening, community. My name is Jose, and I worked as a truck driver hauling cargo for over 10 years. Throughout my career, I experienced several events that some might classify as paranormal, since driving thousands and thousands of miles on the road at night lends itself to all those things. This is one of the stories that impacted me the most. I was leaving the city of Tijuana, planning to travel along the border all the way to Tamaulipas. I set off around 8 at night. I wasn't tired since I had just taken a long nap at a rest stop, so I was ready to drive through the night. Everything was as usual. The road was somewhat empty that night with hardly any traffic, which I liked. It was past midnight when, out of nowhere, a white van emerged from the brush behind me. I didn't pay it much attention, thinking it was someone who had decided to park there to rest a bit, but it didn't overtake me. Since I had to drive slowly for obvious reasons, whenever there was a car behind me, I would signal with my lights for them to pass, and I'd move over. I did the same with this van, but it stayed behind me, not wanting to pass. I thought maybe the driver was scared because it was night, and maybe they weren't very experienced with driving on the highway. So, I slowed down even more and signaled again for them to overtake me, but they didn't. They also reduced their speed to keep behind me. At this point, I was somewhat annoyed, not understanding what game this person was playing, but I decided to ignore it and just keep driving. 2 hours passed and the van was still behind me. I decided to pull over at a gas station to use the bathroom and grab something to eat, but also to let the van go its own way and not follow me anymore. However, when I turned to enter the gas station, the van did the same but didn't go as far as the parking lot. It just stayed at the edge of the road, stopped with its lights on. I went into the bathroom in the little shop there, but when I came out, the van was still there waiting for me. I got very annoyed and decided to walk over to tell whoever the driver was what their problem was, asking if they were following me or if it was some kind of stupid prank. So, I went up to it and started knocking on the window because they were completely dark, and you couldn't see anything inside. I knocked on their window to tell them to open up, not to be a coward, and to face me, to tell me what they were playing at, but they never opened it. I shouted that if they kept following me, I would report them to my other friends who were also drivers so they could deal with them. But then, suddenly, the van started and almost ran me over. I was still very upset but relieved that I had finally made them leave and let me continue on my way in peace. I got back in my trailer. I stayed parked there for about 30 minutes, smoked a cigarette, and then continued on my way. Everything was normal again, and it was about to be 3 in the morning when, once again, the same white van appeared out of nowhere, glued to the back of me. I thought this must be some kind of joke. I didn't know what to do. It was very annoying because I knew it was something personal to be followed for more than 3 hours. Something must have been wanted, so I thought about reaching the next rest stop, which was about an hour and a half away, and parking there to ask the other truck drivers for help in getting this person out of the van to finally confront them, as it seemed they would follow me there. So, I kept driving patiently with the van stuck behind me. But then, finally, it started to pull up alongside me. I thought it would overtake me, so I reduced my speed, but the van did the same. Its window was directly next to mine. I knew the driver was watching me. I honked for them to move away since it was dangerous to go like that. But then the van started to get closer and closer to my trailer. I didn't know what to do. I just kept honking and shouting, asking what the heck they were doing. Then I felt it hit my trailer. I lost control of the steering wheel and went off the road, breaking through a fence and ending up in the middle of the brush. I wasn't hurt, but the engine shut off completely, and when I tried to start it, it wouldn't work. I tried to use the radio, but it also didn't work. There was no signal on my cell phone to ask for help either. To be honest, I was somewhat scared because I was in the middle of nowhere at 3 in the morning, cut off, and without anyone to help me. As if that wasn't enough, suddenly I saw some lights approaching, and my heart stopped when I saw it was that white van that had been following me all night. It parked behind me, turned off the engine and the lights. I locked the window and took my knife, which I always carried with me. The only thing I could think of was that it was some criminal group that wanted to kidnap me, as insecurity was at its peak. But after about 5 minutes, no one got out. I made the difficult decision to go down and try to talk to the person to leave me alone and to go away. So that's what I did. I walked slowly to where the van was with the knife in my pocket, ready to use it, shining the flashlight from my cell phone because you couldn't see anything at all. We were away from the road. Everything was brush with the sounds of the night in the background. I got to the van and went to the side of its window and knocked twice, asking, "Hello, can we talk? Please lower your window." But there was no response. I tried to look inside by pressing my head against the window with my hands on the sides of my eyes to see inside. Friends, there was absolutely nothing there. I looked in the back, and there was nothing but a pile of trash. It looked like the van had been abandoned for a long time. I opened the door and confirmed it was completely empty. I can't explain the horror I felt, just wondering who had been driving all that time, following me. I ran back to my trailer, but before getting in, I saw a person standing in front of it, a few meters away from my trailer. I saw his shadow by the lights of the truck. I said, "Hello," but he didn't respond. He just gestured with his hand for me to follow him. I hesitated but did it, thinking he might need help. He was walking very fast. I could barely see him in the distance. I must say the place smelled very bad, like dead animals. I kept walking, following the person, when suddenly he stopped, looking at a specific spot on the ground. I ran to get there, but when I arrived, the person was no longer there. I searched for him with my cell phone's flashlight and shouted to see where he was, but he no longer appeared. Then I turned my head to the ground where that person had been staring intently, and there they were, 3 lifeless bodies. I don't know how long they had been there because you couldn't even tell if they were men or women. I was very shocked to see that. I ran away from there and got back into my trailer, but the white van was no longer there. It had disappeared. I tried to start the trailer and miraculously, it started on the first try. I left there and called the police to report the discovery. I was driving with tears in my eyes, very shocked by what I had just seen. I arrived at the rest stop, and there were 2 co-workers who, seeing how I got out of my trailer, ran to see what had happened. I didn't even know how to explain to them everything that had happened that night. As best as I could, I told them, and they stayed there with me, which calmed me down because I couldn't continue driving like that. Then I received a call on my cell phone. It was one of the detectives who had arrived at the place I had indicated. He said they wanted to ask me some questions, and I told them where I was. About half an hour later, they arrived. There were 2 detectives. They asked me how I had found the bodies, what I was doing there in that place. I didn't even know how to answer them because I knew it was something hard to believe. But I told them everything, risking being labeled a liar and detained as a suspect or something of the sort. When I finished telling them, one of the detectives showed me a photo. It was a photo of that van that had been following me all night. He asked me if this was the van. I looked at it surprised and told them yes, that was it. They looked at each other, and the other detective started to tell me that the van belonged to those 3 young men who had appeared lifeless in that brush. They were 3 students who had been missing for weeks. Their families had reported their disappearance and said they had left for Ciudad Juarez for a report they would do there about the missing women in that city since they were studying journalism. but they never reached their destination, and for 2 weeks, nothing was known of them. That's why it was very important to know how I found them, because the young men had been deprived of life by gunshots, and they wanted to clear me of any ties with criminal gangs. I was very shocked. I started to cry and told them that was the truth. The detectives told me to calm down and that if I remembered anything else, to call them. After that, they left. I was very affected after that, just thinking that those guys, those souls, had chosen me to find their bodies so their families would stop searching for them. That has been the hardest story of my entire career as a truck driver. Thank you for listening. My name is Gerardo, and for a long time I worked as a truck driver for various companies. Now I am retired since I am already 70 years old, but during my time as a trucker, I experienced many paranormal events. The story I am about to tell you happened 20 years ago. I was transporting construction materials from Nuevo León to the state of Mexico. I had been driving for 10 hours, and night had fallen, but I enjoyed traveling at night because the roads were emptier. I liked that feeling of peace and solitude. I was listening to music as I usually did, when suddenly I saw a man on the side of the road hitchhiking. I immediately pulled over. Back then it was very common to see people asking for a ride, and I always agreed. I liked helping people, so this time was no exception. The man appeared to be about 60 years old, wearing dirty and somewhat old clothes. I asked him where he was going, and he said he needed help because his truck had broken down a kilometer ahead, but no one had passed by to help him. I told him to get in, and I would take him there and try to help with my tools. The man got in and sat in the passenger seat very quiet. I asked him which companies he worked for, but he didn't respond. I then asked if he was okay since his clothes were torn and dirty, but he remained silent. We had passed the kilometer he mentioned, and we were supposed to have arrived at his truck, but there was nothing. I asked if it was further ahead, but he just pointed forward with his finger, indicating for me to keep driving. So, I continued. However, the more time passed, the more nervous I became because there was no truck parked on the side of the road. Then I realized we had returned to the same place where I picked him up, kilometer 62. I was very surprised because it was impossible that we had returned. I had only driven straight. There was no way to come back to the same place. I didn't understand what was happening. The man hadn't said a single word since he got into my truck, so I decided to pull over and ask him to get out, because this didn't feel right to me anymore. The man got out without saying anything, without thanking me or looking back at me. I saw him walk towards the woods and then disappear. I didn't want to leave him there, but he was no longer visible, lost among the bushes. I didn't know what to do since it wasn't right to leave him there alone. Then, another truck passed by and parked in front of me. The driver came down and approached my door to talk to me. I got out to see what he wanted. He said, "Friend, you have to get out of here. You saw a man asking for a ride, didn't you?" I asked how he knew that. He told me that he drove on that road almost every day, and that the man who asked for a ride was a trucker who had an accident right where my truck was parked, and the man had died. For many years he had been hitchhiking, and those who stopped to give him a ride disappeared. A friend of his, who hadn't been heard from for a year, was talking to him over the radio, telling jokes, and chatting as he passed by that kilometer. His friend mentioned he would give a ride to a man who seemed to have had an accident, and they would talk again later on the radio. After that call, they never heard from him or his truck again, along with many other truckers who said the man always appeared there asking for a ride. The few who had decided to stop were taken to his limbo where he was trapped, which is why they were never heard from again. I thanked him for taking the time to stop and warn me about what had happened. He said it was no problem, that as colleagues, we had to support each other. He ended by saying that it might not be the last time I saw that man asking for a ride. If I ever passed by there again, I would likely encounter him again, but I should just ignore him and continue on my way. After that, the man left, and so did I. But to this day, I still don't know why that tormented soul asking for a ride let me go and didn't take me with him like the other truckers. It's something I will always wonder about. Another story worth telling happened to me just before I retired. I was driving on the highway from Mexico City to Cuernavaca. This time, I was with a coworker. We were chatting. It was already late at night, and I was getting sleepy. So we decided to stop to switch drivers so I could catch some sleep in the cabin while he took the wheel. Just as I was settling in the back, he said, "Gerardo, look at that." I opened the curtain to look, and there was an animal walking on two legs, approaching our truck. We couldn't quite make out what it was, as it was still some distance away, but it looked so strange and even eerie. My coworker asked if it was an animal, a person, or what it was. I told him we should get out of there. Whatever that thing was, it wasn't anything good. So he tried to start the truck, but we were stuck. It seemed it had rained and there was a lot of mud. He kept trying to get us out, but the truck wouldn't budge. That thing was getting closer, and it was taking more of an animal shape. It resembled an ox, but standing on two legs. Then suddenly it stopped and didn't move any closer. We kept our eyes on it, thinking it wanted to attack us. I told my friend to move over so I could try moving the truck, but my attempts were futile. One of us had to get down to see where we needed to move the tires, but neither of us wanted to do it, as that thing was still there staring at our truck. I decided to get down to end this, but my coworker told me not to, saying that thing was waiting for us to get down to attack us or do something to us. I said I didn't believe in those things and not to be so superstitious, but he asked if I didn't feel the heavy energy that had been present since that thing appeared. Truthfully, I did feel it and had never felt such fear before. It was a very strange atmosphere. However, I didn't want to feed into his theory about that thing, so I told him I didn't feel anything and that he should help so we could get out of there. He begged me not to get down, to listen to him, saying his grandfather, who was also a truck driver for decades, had told him that if he ever saw an animal on two legs in the middle of nowhere, he should run away because that was the most evil thing one could imagine, and to pray to ward it off. I told him I always carried an image of God that my wife always placed on the dashboard for my protection, and that we could use it to pray. Without hesitation, he took it and started to pray out loud. He asked me to join him, and so we did. Suddenly, we saw that thing howling so loudly, it seemed like it was right next to us. I started to sweat, and my legs were shaking. I had never felt so much fear. We kept reciting the Lord's Prayer over and over until that thing started to walk backward. It kept looking at us but was moving away, and its terrifying howls gradually faded until we lost sight of it. My coworker said, "This is the moment," and quickly got down to tell me where to move the truck. I got it unstuck very quickly, and we left as fast as we could. In my life as a truck driver, that was undoubtedly the most terrifying, chilling, and horrifying thing that ever happened to me. My name is Manuel, and I've been transporting goods in my trailer for several years now. It's a very demanding job with a lot of responsibility, and it can be dangerous as well since I often have to travel through many of Mexico's highways, some more dangerous than others, either due to their sharp curves or the presence of crime. However, the story I'm about to tell you surpasses both of these dangers by a wide margin. That night, I had been driving for many hours, making my way through the roads between Tamaulipas and San Luis Potosi, traversing the mountainous terrain filled with perilous curves. It was a challenging stretch, and to make matters worse, a heavy rain began to pour down. At the time, I had relatively little experience, which made me somewhat nervous, to be honest. The curves on that road were particularly intimidating, especially at night and in the rain. Given the many hours I had already been on the road, fatigue began to set in. I knew I needed to stop and rest for a while since it was dangerous to continue driving under those conditions, but the next rest stop was still far away. So I looked for a place where I could pull over and sleep in the cabin for an hour. I parked right in front of a hill among the trees, turned off my truck, and took my umbrella and flashlight to go to the bathroom. After returning to my truck, I noticed something unsettling as I walked back. There were muddy shoe prints on the steps of my truck's passenger side, and the door was slightly open with the light inside turned on, even though I had left both doors closed. This filled me with fear, as I thought someone might have climbed aboard while I was away. So I cautiously opened the passenger door and shined my flashlight inside, asking, "Who's there? You need to get out." But no response came. Deciding to very slowly pull back the cabin curtain, I hesitated when, just before fully opening it, I heard a man's voice crying, begging, "Please help her, help her." I yanked the curtain open, but to my astonishment, no one was there. How was this possible if I had just heard that man speaking from inside? I started to shiver, not having noticed a detail before. On top of the bed, in the very corner, was a very old and dirty baby carrier covered in grass and mud, torn in some parts. I was shocked because I had no idea how it had gotten there. I threw it out of my truck, closed the door, and started the engine. I didn't want to sleep anymore, I just wanted to leave that place. I was very nervous about what had happened and also very tired, having not slept in almost 20 hours. As I tried to drive away from that spot, I collided with something. Looking back slightly, I got out to see what it was and whether my truck had been damaged. When I walked to the front, I saw 3 large concrete crosses, and it appeared I had broken 2 of them. Approaching to see if there was anything I could do, I noticed a small tombstone that read, "Rest in peace, Peña Almanza family," accompanied by a framed photo showing a woman, a man, and a baby about a year old. It seemed they had died in an accident at that spot. Everything made sense at that moment. I was sure those footprints and the voice I had heard belonged to that man, a grieving soul pleading for me to save his baby. Tears filled my eyes as I thought of my own wife, who was pregnant. I was soon to be a father, and I couldn't fathom the terrible pain that man must have felt, trying to protect his daughter even in death. It was a sad story, one that leaves a lasting mark. Thank you for watching this video. I invite you to subscribe for more terrifying content. Like the video and share it with your friends. There's much more content to come. Help me spread the fear. See you in next video.